They say every marriage holds secrets, but Lillian Westfield never imagined hers would nearly destroy her, especially while carrying her first child. Married to billionaire investor Christian Westfield, she believed her love story resembled a fairy tale: lavish galas, private jets, a mansion overlooking Central Park. But beneath the glittering surface brewed a betrayal so brazen it arrived with a financial invoice. The audacity. It wasn't from her husband. A mysterious woman sent Lillian a bill for services provided itemized with shocking demands. Stunned and pregnant, Lillian refused to be a victim. Instead, she crafted divorce terms so powerful they rocked New York's elite to its core. Lillian Westfield first met Christian Westfield at an auction for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The year was 2015. The moment she spotted his dark, tailored suit and confident stride, she felt a jolt, a mixture of caution and attraction. She had grown up hearing about powerful men from her father, a former advisor at Goldman Sachs, who used to remind her that wealth can be as ruthless as it is glamorous. Yet Christian's charm disarmed her. He didn't just seem wealthy. He seemed genuinely passionate about the arts, about philanthropy, about living a life of meaning. At first glance, their life together looked plucked from a storybook. They traveled to Europe every summer, explored hidden architectural gems, and built a philanthropic foundation aimed at supporting children's education in underdeveloped regions. Lillian, an accomplished interior designer, had her own thriving business, establishing herself as the go-to decorator for boutique hotels in Manhattan. As a power couple, they often shared front-page features in lifestyle magazines. Their townhouse near Central Park boasted a marble foyer, stained glass skylight, and an elevator that glided through 5 floors of meticulously designed spaces. They hosted charity balls complete with celebrity guest lists that included people like philanthropist Bill Gates and actress Emma Watson, raising millions for causes dear to them. The public saw them as unstoppable, the epitome of a modern altruistic duo, beautiful, brilliant, and generous. Behind the scenes, though, it wasn't all gleam. The seeds of resentment had begun to sprout the moment Christian's hedge fund soared to new heights. As his business empire expanded, so did his ego. Meetings late into the night, lavish parties with potential investors, and whispered phone calls started to erode the closeness they once cherished. Lillian sensed shifts in Christian's behavior, unexplained getaways, dinner cancellations, fleeting messages on his phone that he'd quickly hide. But Lillian believed in second chances in conversation over confrontation. She also believed that life was cyclical. Times of closeness and distance came in waves. Unaware that a storm of betrayal was brewing just beyond her horizon, Lillian tried to keep her trust intact, focusing on her interior design projects and the exciting news that she was finally pregnant. Lillian grew up in a suburban New Jersey neighborhood, her father Richard O'Donnell serving as a financial consultant for Morgan Stanley. From an early age, she absorbed the language of high finance. Her father would bring home annual reports from clients like Warren Buffett and talk about the power of compound interest. It was also at the dinner table where she first learned about the pitfalls of greed and the price one pays when ambition becomes obsession. By the time she met Christian Westfield at that Met Gala auction, Lillian was already a well-regarded interior designer. She had turned a modest inheritance from her grandmother into a small fortune by flipping undervalued apartments in emerging neighborhoods. Her well-earned confidence and thorough financial knowledge ensured she was never overshadowed by wealthy suitors. Christian's background, meanwhile, was more silver-spooned. Born into old-money aristocracy in Boston, he attended the most prestigious prep schools before heading to Harvard. Yet what set him apart, at least in the beginning, was his ability to empathize. He did not fit the cliché of a spoiled trust fund brat. As Lillian got to know Christian, she found a man who spoke passionately about social responsibility and climate change. He created a hedge fund that, according to him, prioritized ethical investments in renewable energy and technology aimed at improving society. The early days of their courtship were magical. They explored the Met Museum hand in hand, discussing art from the Impressionist era, then grabbed late-night pizza in Queens to keep it real, as Christian liked to say. Sundays were reserved for volunteer work at a soup kitchen, an activity Christian insisted they do to stay connected to the community. When Christian proposed a year later, it was on the steps of the Lincoln Center, following a performance of Swan Lake. The ring was a vintage emerald-cut diamond, a family heirloom passed down from his grandmother. Lillian felt overwhelmed by love and the sense of destiny. "We'll do incredible things together," Christian whispered into her ear. She believed him wholeheartedly. During these early years, Lillian never doubted his sincerity. If Christian needed more hours at the office, she assumed it was for the hedge fund's philanthropic goals. If he was secretive at times, she chalked it up to the demands of client confidentiality. How could she have known that beneath the facade of social consciousness and genuine heart, the seeds of infidelity would eventually take root? Running her own interior design firm had not been easy. Lillian's first big break came when she was approached to redesign the interior of a boutique hotel in Soho. She spent months curating artisanal light fixtures, sourcing reclaimed wood for accent walls, and designing custom furniture that seamlessly blended comfort with minimalist aesthetics. The project earned her a feature in Architectural Digest, catapulting her into Manhattan's elite design circle. Lillian soon expanded her portfolio, taking on high-profile clients. She balanced artistic vision with commercial viability, her skill lying in the ability to interpret her clients' personalities into living spaces. Rich colors and subtle textures became her signature. She believed that a home should tell a story about the people who lived there, one of warmth, openness, and the life experiences they cherished. This philosophy extended into her personal life. Lillian was a giver, always placing others first. She volunteered at local shelters, helped new designers find footing in a competitive industry, and offered internships to promising students from underprivileged backgrounds. She possessed a quiet resilience, never one to broadcast her struggles or triumphs. Instead, she let the results speak for themselves. When she discovered she was pregnant, Lillian's heart brimmed with joy. She envisioned a child who would inherit both her creativity and Christian's passion for social good. She began planning a nursery in soft grays and buttery yellows, set to be the coziest space in their enormous townhouse. But amid her excitement, she noticed the first ripples of tension with Christian. He seemed distracted, his phone always buzzing with calls from work. Occasionally, she would overhear bits of hushed conversations that ended abruptly once she entered the room. Still, she clung to hope. Love, after all, had guided them this far, and she believed people could weather storms if they communicated openly. Little did she know, she was about to receive a wake-up call, a private invoice in the mail, a brazen challenge to her place in Christian's life, and a demand that would shatter her illusions of security. The Westfield Fund. Christian's brainchild was initially small. He invested mostly in tech startups that promised environmental solutions, solar energy, wind turbines, and eco-friendly manufacturing. His success stories included early investments in Tesla and Beyond Meat, which propelled the fund into the spotlight as an example of how ethical investments could also be lucrative. As the fund grew, Christian found himself rubbing shoulders with New York's most prominent financiers. He attended exclusive gatherings at the St. Regis Hotel and private dinners in penthouse suites overlooking the Hudson River. Clients flocked to him, eager to be associated with a fund that claimed to do good for the planet while multiplying returns. Those who studied Christian's ascent closely noticed how everything seemed to accelerate after a lavish weekend in the Hamptons, hosted by none other than Robert Crown, the reclusive oil magnate turned philanthropist. Rumors circulated about who Christian rubbed elbows with that weekend executives from Morgan Stanley. A few tech geniuses and some foreign dignitaries known to hold massive generational wealth. Some friends teased Christian that he was transforming from a philanthropic dreamer into a cutthroat tycoon. He laughed it off, but something undeniably shifted in him. He started wearing bespoke suits from Savile Row, arrived at charity galas in a chauffeur-driven Bentley, and increasingly prized the image of success. It was as though he believed the appearance of virtue was as important, if not more so, than actual virtue. Lillian noticed these changes. In the past, Christian had spoken passionately about supporting impoverished villages in Africa. Now he was too busy managing new deals to attend the foundation meetings. He insisted that a thriving hedge fund would allow them to give more. "We're playing the long game," he'd say, with a charming smile. But after each new infusion of capital, Christian seemed more restless. Phone calls lingered late into the night, often behind closed doors. Lillian could sense an invisible wall erecting between them. When she tried to get his attention mentioning new designs, philanthropic initiatives, even her doctor's appointments, his replies were absent-minded and perfunctory. Despite her growing concerns, she hoped it was a phase. Many men, she reasoned, became workaholics to secure a future for their families. And with her pregnancy, perhaps Christian felt added pressure to expand their wealth. But those suspicions about him, having secrets, whatever they were, gnawed at her, a persistent whisper in the back of her mind that refused to be silenced. A few months into her pregnancy, Lillian started noticing anomalies that went beyond mere busyness. On Christian's nights out, supposedly spent with venture capitalists, he would come home with a faint trace of perfume floral notes she had never owned. When Lillian asked about it, he laughed it off. "You know how parties are," he said. "People hug your suit, picks up 1,000 cents. Lillian tried to brush it aside, but more clues surfaced: phone calls at odd hours that Christian would abruptly dismiss as wrong numbers. Suspicious credit card charges at a spa in Midtown on nights he claimed to be at the office, plus the occasional text message from unfamiliar names, women she had never heard of. Christian's excuses stacked up. The tension seeped into every corner of their relationship. Their once lively breakfast chats turned into stiff, polite conversations about schedules and surface matters. No deeper connection, no spontaneous laughter. At times, Christian looked at her belly as though it was both a blessing and a burden. One evening, as Lillian worked late on a new design proposal, she discovered Christian had left his iPad open on the kitchen counter. A message appeared, the preview reading, "Miss me already?" She felt a surge of panic. Before she could unlock the device, Christian swooped in, snatched it, and wore a guarded expression. "Work stuff," he muttered. Lillian's chest tightened. She felt her baby kick as if sensing her anxiety. That same night, she confronted Christian calmly. "If there's something you need to tell me, let's talk. We have a child on the way. We owe it to each other, to be honest," he responded with a dismissive wave. "I'm just stressed, Lillian. Could we not create more drama?" So she stepped back. For the moment, she chose to place her faith in her husband, her unborn child, and the memories of better times. She had no idea her entire world would soon come crashing down, delivered in the form of an elegant envelope addressed to her personally with a price tag attached that would make her blood boil. It happened on a Friday morning. Lillian was in the foyer reviewing design samples when the doorbell rang. Expecting a delivery of custom fabrics, she opened the door to see a courier holding a small stack of envelopes. Among them was a sleek black envelope sealed with a wax stamp, no return address. Something about it radiated importance and mystery. Lillian set the other mail aside and carefully opened the black envelope. Inside was a crisp piece of stationery that read, "Invoice to Mrs. Lillian Westfield. 4 evenings at the Eclipse Spa. 4,500. Shopping spree at Bergdorf. Goodman personal items. $12,000. Fine dining at Le Poème private booth. Chef's tasting. 2,500. Emotional labor and time. As discussed, $50,000. Total $69,000. At the bottom, scrawled in a careful looping handwriting, was a brief note. Please settle this bill promptly. These luxuries were enjoyed at your husband's request. Tiffany Monroe. For a moment, Lillian stood frozen, unable to comprehend the audacity. A mistress, a woman openly acknowledging her affair with Christian, was invoicing her rage, humiliation, and heartbreak collided in a single, dizzying wave. She dropped the envelope, sank into a chair, and tried to steady her breathing. Her baby fluttered within her, an unsettling reminder of the stakes. Tiffany Monroe. The name was unfamiliar, but Lillian suspected it was the same person behind those suspicious messages on Christian's iPad. How had things escalated to a point where the woman felt confident enough to demand money directly from the wife Lillian spent the afternoon in a spiral of disbelief and despair? She pressed the invoice against the kitchen table, half tempted to rip it to shreds. Instead, she tried calling Christian. Straight to voicemail. She texted him short and direct. "We need to talk ASAP." Hours passed without a response. By sundown, humiliation gave way to fury. How dare Tiffany treat her like a business partner who simply owed her a cut of Christian's extravagances? How dare Christian remain silent? Lillian began drafting a plan in her head, one that would safeguard her unborn child and ensure that she would never again be at the mercy of anyone's betrayal. The mistress wanted a bill settled. Lillian would respond with something far more drastic: divorce terms that no one in their right mind would dare dismiss. Christian finally walked through the door at around 10 that night, reeking of cologne and exhaustion. Lillian waited in the living room, the black envelope perched ominously on the coffee table. The moment he saw it, his face paled. He tried to mask his panic behind a forced smile, but Lillian's glare told him that no charade would work this time. She held up the invoice. "Want to explain this?" Her voice was low, almost calm, which unnerved Christian more than any outburst would. He stammered, "It's not what you think." But the words rang hollow in the silent room. Christian Lillian said, her voice quivering just enough to betray the emotional storm within. "I've tolerated late nights, suspicious phone calls, and secrets. But now this woman, Tiffany Monroe, has crossed a line. She sent me a bill for being your mistress. That's beyond humiliation. That's cruelty." Christian sank into an armchair. For a moment, he covered his face with his hands. When he finally looked up, Lillian saw a glimpse of guilt, overshadowed by desperation. Tiffany. She was an investor contact. One thing led to another. It was a mistake. Lillian held up a hand. "Stop." I don't need every sordid detail. She took a trembling breath. What I need is respect, honesty, and space to think. He tried to move closer to take her hand, but she pulled away. Lillian, I love you. I just don't, she said sharply. No more empty words. She pressed a protective hand against her belly. I have a child to consider, a future that cannot be tied to your lies and your wandering impulses. Christian tried to protest, but Lillian's steely resolve shone in her eyes. She told him she would be meeting with her attorney and that she expected his cooperation in a formal separation, if not a complete divorce. He pleaded, offered to see a marriage counselor, anything to keep this from exploding into public scandal. But Lillian's mind was already made up. She was no longer the naive, hopeful wife who believed everything could be mended with forgiveness. This betrayal, complete with a humiliating invoice, was a line in the sand, and she intended to make Christian and his mistress regret every cent of that $69,000. As dawn broke, Lillian found herself in a dilemma. She didn't want to face this alone, yet she hated the idea of revealing Christian's betrayal to friends or family. It felt too raw, too shameful. But she needed guidance, and so with a heavy heart, she called the one person who would stand by her unconditionally, her old college friend, Rebecca Becky Sandoval. Becky was a lawyer specializing in family law, with a stint at the prestigious firm Morgan & Ledbetter. They had remained close since dorm life at Parsons School of Design, bonding over late-night pizza and endless chatter about personal dreams. Becky had always admired Lillian's warmth and creativity, just as Lillian admired Becky's fierce intellect and unwavering loyalty. When Lillian arrived at Becky's Upper West Side apartment, she clutched the incriminating invoice like a damning piece of evidence. Becky's eyes widened as she read the details, her face flushing with indignation. What kind of sociopath demands money from a pregnant wife for entertaining her husband? Becky asked, outraged. Lillian sighed, tears brimming. This is what my life has become. I feel humiliated and lost. I don't want to remain married to him if this is how he treats me. But I also need to protect myself and especially the baby. Becky set aside her coffee mug. I'll help you navigate this. We'll make sure you get what you deserve. Christian is wealthy, and you've invested years of emotional labor and your own funds into this marriage. You should be compensated, especially with a child on the way. Relief flooded Lillian. I've been so afraid. Christian's influence is enormous. The press loves him. I don't want to be seen as some gold digger or a scorned woman looking for revenge. Becky's gaze hardened. Don't you dare blame yourself. If he wants to flaunt his mistress's bills, we'll see how he handles real legal action. Let's prepare for the worst. It might get ugly, but you won't face it alone. With that conversation, Lillian felt a spark of hope. She had an ally, someone who believed in her worth and had the legal chops to fight for it. The next move was to draft a set of divorce terms, so formidable that Tiffany's petty invoice would look like spare change in comparison. Days passed as Becky and Lillian meticulously prepared the divorce papers. They combed through Christian's assets, from his shares in ecotech companies to real estate holdings in Manhattan, London, and even a small vineyard in Napa Valley. It was a painstaking process, but each detail added another brick to Lillian's protective wall. During this time, Christian vacillated between begging forgiveness and lashing out. He bombarded Lillian with frantic calls, alternately promising to end things with Tiffany and accusing Lillian of overreacting. Her silence only fueled his desperation. But the mistress, Tiffany Monroe, had other plans. She was about to make her move, determined to ensure she wasn't dismissed as a fling. One morning, Lillian awoke to a flurry of missed calls from unknown numbers. Confused, she checked her voicemail. "Mrs. Westfield, we're reporters from the Daily Chronicle. We'd love a comment on the rumor that your husband might be separating from you for Ms. Munro." Her heart raced as she realized Tiffany had leaked the affair to the press. Within hours, paparazzi swarmed her townhouse, snapping photos of Lillian with her baby bump, shouting questions about the woman who sent you a bill. Panicked Lillian called Becky, who advised her to stay indoors and not respond publicly. "Any statement now could be twisted," Becky cautioned. "Let's finalize the divorce terms first." But Tiffany wasn't done. She posted cryptic photos on social media, hinting at a luxurious lifestyle spa visits, helicopter rides, lavish dinners. In one particularly brazen post, she wore a diamond necklace that Lillian recognized as Christian's gift during their first anniversary trip to Paris. The caption read, "When he knows how to keep a woman happy." Lillian's fury threatened to consume her. This woman's audacity was unrelenting. She was not simply content with an affair. She craved publicity, as though flaunting her conquest of a billionaire husband was a twisted badge of honor. While Christian tried to contain the media fallout, Lillian focused on her unborn child. She felt the baby's kicks more frequently. Now a constant reminder that she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for a secure future for her little one, free from the toxic betrayal that had marred the family's foundations. The tension surged to a boiling point. If Tiffany thought she could manipulate the narrative and paint Lillian as a hapless victim, she had underestimated the strength and cunning of the woman she had so brazenly provoked. The phone refused to stop ringing. Journalists, bloggers, even former acquaintances looking for gossip. Everyone seemed ravenous for a scoop. Lillian leaned against her kitchen counter, trying to steady her breath. Christian had left frantic messages. "Don't do this, Lillian. We can weather the storm. I'll cut Tiffany out of my life." But a single glance at the black envelope pinned to her fridge reminded her why she couldn't stay silent any longer. She grabbed her keys and left the townhouse escorted by a private security guard Becky had arranged to keep paparazzi at bay. Her destination was the Morgan & Ledbetter law firm, Becky's office, where she would finalize her decision to file for divorce. Once inside Becky's glass-walled conference room, she was greeted by towering stacks of documents. Lillian's chest tightened at the sight. "This is it, then, the official separation," she said. Softly, Becky placed a reassuring hand on Lillian's shoulder. "I know it's overwhelming, but we've made sure every detail is covered: spousal support, child support, property division, you name it." Lillian nodded, flipping through the pages. Her eyes landed on the settlement figure, an amount so staggering it seemed surreal. But as Becky reminded her, Christian's personal fortune had soared into the billions. The sum was only a fraction of his empire, yet more than enough to ensure a comfortable life for Lillian and the baby. "Are you sure you're ready for the media circus this might spark?" Becky asked, her voice gentle. Divorce with these stakes is bound to attract even more attention. Lillian inhaled deeply, recalling the humiliating bill Tiffany had sent. She imagined the quiet life she wanted for her child, free from secrets and humiliations. "I'm ready," she said, signing the necessary forms. With that pen stroke, she severed the bonds that had once been the cornerstone of her love story. No matter the chaos to come, she resolved that her child would never look at her with the sorrow of a mother too fearful to stand up for herself. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the moment she walked out of that office, she would be Lillian Westfield, soon-to-be ex-wife of a billionaire and a woman determined to forge a new beginning. The documents lay neatly stacked on Becky's conference room table, a quiet storm bound in crisp legal formatting. Lillian stared at the title page. Draft Westfield versus Westfield Dissolution of Marriage Agreement, and felt her chest tighten with a rush of conflicting emotions. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was about reclaiming her power, securing her child's future, and sending a message to a man who had treated her love as expendable. Becky slid the top page toward her. It's all here. Everything we discussed. I've made sure no one can accuse you of being vindictive. This is clean, comprehensive, and bulletproof. Together they reviewed the details one more time. The settlement began with the foundation generous spousal maintenance tied to a fixed percentage of Christian's annual earnings, calculated to grow proportionally with the success of the Westfield Fund. Given his billions in holdings and assets, it would ensure Lillian lived not just comfortably, but independently. Child support came next. A secure figure that would be reviewed annually with adjustments for inflation healthcare costs and private education from kindergarten to Ivy League. Becky had even included contingencies, full coverage for a nanny, prenatal and postnatal care, and a clause that Christian would be legally responsible for any emergency medical expenses for both mother and child, no matter the cost. Then came the trust fund. Your child, Becky said softly, will have full access to a multi-million-dollar trust by age 25. You'll manage it as guardian until then. No interference. Lillian nodded, feeling the protective mother in her rising. He won't grow up wondering if he's worthy. Real estate was next. Lillian would retain full ownership of the Boston estate, historic, sprawling and quietly luxurious. It wasn't just property. It was legacy, and she would make sure it became a haven of stability for her child. The Central Park townhouse, their former marital home, would be liquidated. The proceeds would be split, but only after Lillian received a payout for the renovations and interior design work she had done herself. Her own touch, her artistry finally acknowledged as valuable. But perhaps the most telling section of the settlement came in the form of two unusual clauses. The first, profit sharing in the Westfield Fund. Though Christian had always been its public face, Lillian had helped shape its philanthropic identity. Her introductions, her public speaking, her networking in philanthropic circles had brought in over a dozen major investors. Becky argued and documented those contributions in detail. Every man builds his empire on the back of someone, Becky said. And you were the one holding him up. Now the world will know it. The second clause was symbolic and cathartic. It was labeled compensatory damages for emotional distress and public humiliation. A direct response to the infamous Mistress invoice Tiffany had so boldly sent. Becky tapped the section. $500,000. It won't undo what she did. But it's a message? Lillian didn't smile, but her eyes hardened with clarity. She sent me a bill, she murmured. So I'm sending her the invoice she wasn't expecting. At the end of the document, a confidentiality agreement sealed the terms. If Christian or Tiffany leaked any personal details or attempted to slander Lillian's name in the press, the financial penalties would be swift and severe. It was, as Becky put it, the legal equivalent of a velvet hammer. Lillian set down the pen and looked at Becky. Do you think he'll sign? Becky leaned back. He'll fume. He'll curse. But he'll sign. If he doesn't, we take it to court, and Tiffany's antics become courtroom evidence. Christian knows exactly how much he stands to lose. Lillian breathed deeply, her hand resting on her belly. This isn't about revenge. It's about respect. For myself, for my child. Becky nodded. Exactly. Without another word, Lillian picked up the pen and signed her name. It was elegant, it was final, and it was worth every dollar. She had entered the fight with her dignity in tatters. Now she was walking out with her name, her future, and $1 million reminder that some women don't break. They build. Christian Westfield stared at the divorce settlement as if it were written in fire. Every clause, every figure, every line item was a monument to the reality he had so carefully tried to avoid. Lillian wasn't bluffing. She wasn't broken. She had turned every ounce of betrayal into strategy, and he was holding the evidence of it in his trembling hands. His office at the Westfield Fund, once a sanctuary of ego and ambition, now felt like a gilded cage. The sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows offered no comfort. The city below, which once bowed to his every whim, now looked indifferent. He grabbed his phone and dialed. Lillian answered on the third ring. Her voice was cool, steady. "You've seen the papers, I assume." "You're out of your mind," Christian snapped. "These demands are insane. Half the Boston estate, a profit share in my hedge fund. You didn't build any of that." "I built your brand," Lillian replied calmly. "I gave speeches, hosted events, introduced you to investors who believed in our shared vision. And I carried your child while your mistress was out shopping with your black card." Christian fell silent. She continued, voice low but firm. "I'm done arguing. This is about what I'm owed. What our child is owed." He tried to pivot. "I never meant for it to go this far. Tiffany was a mistake. I'll make it right. I'll end it." "You ended it the moment you let her send me a bill," she said. "Now I'm just collecting what's due." He clenched his jaw. "If this goes public, it'll destroy me." "Then sign quietly," she answered. "Or drag it out and let the world watch." The call ended. Christian hurled the phone across the room. It hit the glass wall with a sharp crack, but didn't shatter just like Lillian. She didn't break. She simply became sharper. He sat back down and ran a hand through his hair. In his mind, she had always been the quiet one. The soft-spoken designer who stood by his side smiled for the cameras and forgave easily. He never expected her to outmaneuver him. He never imagined she would be the one to bring him to his knees. But now, for the first time in his life, Christian Westfield had lost. Not in business, not on paper, but where it mattered most. And Lillian. She had just begun to win. The headlines didn't slow down. If anything, Tiffany Monroe's outrageous behavior at the law firm had poured gasoline on an already raging fire. The press had a field day. Rumors swirled across Manhattan's elite social circuits, mixing fact and fabrication into a sensational cocktail of betrayal scandal and high society drama. Westfield showdown, Mistress crashes negotiations. The $69,000 invoice that triggered a $1 million divorce. Pregnant wife shuts down. Mistress mid-tantrum. Bravo. Lillian didn't bother reading most of it. She stayed focused. The settlement was still pending, and Christian's legal team, led by the notoriously aggressive Henry Steinberg, had not backed down. If anything, they were doubling down, working to undermine her role in Christian's empire, attacking her emotional distress claims, and trying to portray her as a woman using pregnancy to secure wealth. It was a ruthless strategy. But Becky had anticipated every move. While Steinberg launched his offensive, Becky went on the defensive and then the offensive of her own. Through a calculated anonymous leak to a reputable gossip columnist, a key piece of the narrative hit the media like lightning, the original invoice Tiffany had sent to Lillian. Public opinion, which had been somewhat divided, swung sharply in Lillian's favor. The image of a pregnant woman receiving a demand for spa bills and emotional labor from her husband's mistress sent shockwaves through society. Tiffany Monroe quickly became a cautionary tale, lampooned online, mocked on talk shows, and widely seen as a greedy opportunist who had overplayed her hand. She actually sent a bill, one late-night host joked. Was there a line item for betrayal with interest? The media, once circling Lillian like vultures, now began referring to her with a new moniker, the Graceful Storm. But it wasn't just a PR win. Behind the scenes, the damage to Christian's carefully curated public image was substantial. The Westfield Fund, which prided itself on socially responsible investing, was suddenly the subject of investor scrutiny. Several high-profile clients privately reached out to Christian's partners with concerns. Rumors began to surface that certain board members were considering asking him to step down as CEO temporarily, if not permanently. And Christian felt it. For the first time in his professional life, he wasn't in control. In private emails and messages, he vacillated between fury and panic. He texted Lillian several times a day, attempting to spin everything. "Let's talk. I didn't expect her to do this. I never meant for you to get dragged into this. I still love you." Lillian never replied. The silence was strategic and empowering. Instead, she met with Becky daily to refine the settlement, adjusting child support to scale with inflation, inserting clauses that would secure access to trust funds for the child, and demanding formal recognition of her contributions to the fund's public image. Every speech you gave Becky reminded her, every gala you hosted, every introduction you made that has value. Don't let them erase that. Christian's team countered. They attempted to settle under the table, offering a smaller figure in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. They framed it as a dignified solution. Lillian saw it for what it was, a final attempt to hush the truth. Her answer was firm. No deal without justice. While her name was being tossed around dinner parties and editorial columns, Lillian stayed grounded. She focused on her health, her baby's well-being, and her own mental clarity. Prenatal yoga calls with her mother and long walks in Riverside Park became her sacred rituals. She journaled often, not about pain, but about resilience. And when news broke that Tiffany Monroe had fled the city, her social media gone dark, her brand in tatters, Lillian didn't celebrate. She simply felt done. Christian's world was imploding. His empire strained under public pressure. His charm, once his strongest weapon, had lost its power. And now, cornered on all sides, he agreed to a final meeting. The room was the same one where Tiffany had once thrown a tantrum. But this time, Lillian was calm commanding and utterly unmoved. On one side, Christian and his legal team, their expressions guarded. On the other, Lillian, Becky, and the full weight of truth on their side. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about legacy. And Lillian had no intention of walking away with anything less than everything she and her child deserved. Lillian had expected the legal negotiations to be tense. She had not expected Tiffany Monroe to storm through the doors of the law firm in 5-inch stilettos, a designer handbag clutched in one manicured hand and a folded legal document in the other, like it was a weapon. It was midday, and the conference room was quiet. On one side sat Lillian Becky and a composed junior associate. On the other, Christian and his lawyer, Henry Steinberg, who had been carefully reviewing the final draft of the divorce settlement. That delicate calm shattered when the door burst open. "You think you can just erase me?" Tiffany's voice sliced through the air, shrill and furious. Everyone turned. "Tiffany, this is a private." Steinberg began rising from his seat. She ignored him and marched straight to Lillian, her heels clicking with sharp finality. "Mrs. Westfield," she sneered, "you have no idea what's coming. Christian made promises. I was there for him when he needed someone. I deserve to be compensated." Lillian didn't flinch. She sat tall, her baby bump visible beneath her cream-knit dress, her face an unreadable mask of calm. "Compensated?" Lillian asked softly, as though tasting the word. "Yes," Tiffany snapped, waving the letter in her hand. "I have a statement from my lawyer. I've been threatened, silenced, and now you want to walk away with everything? Like I was never part of it." Christian rose, then his expression a mix of panic and disbelief. "Tiffany, stop. We've already talked about this." "You weren't supposed to—" "Oh, I'm done waiting," she snapped at him, turning back to Lillian. "I won't be erased. I was with him for months. While you were playing perfect wife, I was the one keeping him sane. You think you're the victim? Please. This world doesn't reward women who play it safe. It rewards women who fight." Becky stood now, placing herself subtly between Lillian and the raging woman. "You're trespassing Ms. Monroe. And from what I can tell, you've just attempted to issue a demand under threat on record." Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare me the lawyer routine. You're just mad I spoke first." Lillian slowly stood. Her calm was unnerving. She walked past Becky, past Christian, until she stood directly in front of Tiffany, close enough to see the sweat beading beneath the woman's flawless foundation. "You sent me a bill," Lillian said, voice steady. "For massages, for dinners, for time. You dared to put a price on betrayal and deliver it to the woman carrying his child." Tiffany's lips parted, but no words came. Lillian took a small breath. "Let me make something very clear. You are not owed a cent. You were a willing participant in someone else's marriage. And if Christian promised you something, take it up with him. But you will never again speak to me. Never send me anything. Never show up in my space." Becky chimed in. "If you do, Ms. Monroe will file for harassment and a restraining order." Christian looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Tiffany, leave." Tiffany glared at him. "You're a coward." He didn't argue. Lillian continued, her voice now cool and clear. "You came here today to prove something. But all you did was confirm what I already knew. You're not a threat. You're noise. And I no longer listen to noise." Tiffany's confidence cracked. She turned to Christian one last time. "Don't think this is over." Then she stormed out, the echo of her heels fading down the hallway. For a long moment, the room was still. Then Becky let out a slow exhale. "Well, that saves us a subpoena." Lillian sat back down and glanced at Christian. He couldn't meet her eyes. The mistress had shown her cards and folded. Lillian, meanwhile, had just proven to everyone in that room that there was only one woman worthy of the Westfield name, and she had no intention of giving it up quietly. The hospital room was unnervingly quiet. Machines beeped, steadily monitoring Lillian and the baby as nurses came and went in soft-soled shoes. Christian sat in the corner watching her sleep. He looked smaller now, his usual commanding presence wilted under guilt and exhaustion. The bags under his eyes weren't from stress alone, they were from shame. Earlier that morning, a new test had revealed complications with Lillian's pregnancy. Though the baby's vitals were stable, doctors warned of heightened risk. Bed rest is crucial, the specialist had said firmly, and minimal emotional stress. You're both strong, but your body needs protection now more than ever. Lillian had nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. She wasn't scared of pain. She had lived with worse. But the possibility of losing her child because of Christian's betrayal, that thought was unbearable. Christian had lingered at her bedside all day, offering water-fluffing pillows, whispering apologies. Lillian didn't trust any of it. Still, she allowed him to stay, not out of forgiveness, but because she wanted answers. As dusk fell and the baby's heartbeat echoed gently in the background, she finally asked why her. Christian hesitated. She turned her head slowly to face him. No more deflections. No more PR statements. I deserve to know. He looked away for a long moment, then took a slow breath. It wasn't love, he began. Voice brittle. It wasn't even lust at first. It was leverage. Lillian's brow furrowed. Christian swallowed hard. Tiffany. She was connected to a group of potential investors. Old money, European banking families. One of them wanted favors, introductions, visibility. Tiffany offered access. She played her role, I played mine. You used her. To close deals? Lillian asked, horrified. He nodded miserably. At first, yes. Then she got comfortable. She wanted more. I didn't stop it. I thought I could control it, contain it. Lillian's hand trembled slightly as she touched her belly. And me. What was I? A prop for your public image? No, he said quickly, standing. Never. You were the only real thing in my life. I know that now. But you didn't know it then, she replied flatly. Not when you let your mistress invoice me. Not when you lied. Not when you put our child at risk. He couldn't meet her eyes. I thought I married a man with vision, she said, softly, tears welling but not falling. Instead, I married someone who sold his soul for quarterly gains. Christian moved closer. Lillian, I'm so sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. She looked at him, weary but unwavering. You can't undo this, but you can stay out of my way while I protect what you nearly destroyed. That night, as Christian left the room, shoulders slumped under the weight of his own undoing, Lillian reached for the small ultrasound photo taped beside her bed. She ran her fingers over the black and white blur of her baby's tiny face. I'll do better, she whispered to her unborn child. For both of us. The betrayal was complete, but so was her resolve. The week Lillian spent in the hospital passed in a haze of fluorescent lights, whispered check-ins, and quiet determination. Her condition had stabilized, the baby was strong, and doctors were optimistic. But emotionally, Lillian was still reeling, not from fear of the future, but from finally accepting the irrevocable truth her marriage to Christian was over. Christian visited often. He brought flowers, asked about the baby, and hovered like a man trying to rewind a clock already broken. But Lillian no longer softened at his gestures. She spoke to him kindly but distantly, the tone of a woman who had drawn a line and refused to cross it again. "You made your choices," she told him during one of his visits. "Now I'm making mine." While Lillian recovered, Becky worked tirelessly behind the scenes. The updated divorce terms were not just strategic, they were airtight. Every clause protected Lillian's physical health, emotional well-being, and financial future. Any further medical care or complications from the pregnancy would be covered in full. The child support agreement wasn't just generous. It was indexed to Christian's investment growth and protected from fluctuation. A separate education fund would guarantee the child access to top institutions, no matter what scandals might affect the Westfield name in the years ahead. Christian's legal team reviewed the documents in tense silence. They knew they had no leverage left. His mistress had imploded their case with one reckless outburst. His reputation, though salvaged publicly with a carefully crafted press release, was in tatters behind closed doors. Investors were uneasy. Board members had whispered about voting him out. And Lillian, graceful as ever, had won without ever stepping into the mud. With quiet reluctance, Christian signed. No outburst, no final attempt at persuasion. Just the scratch of pen on paper, the official end of the marriage he had ruined. The following afternoon, Lillian was released from the hospital. Her steps were slow, cautious, but every movement radiated purpose. Paparazzi waited outside the private entrance. She walked past them calmly, sunglasses on a protective hand resting on her baby bump. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any headline ever could. A car arranged by Becky whisked her away, not to the townhouse she once shared with Christian, but to a sleek, sunlit condo in Tribeca one Lillian had secured under her own name. The space was modern and warm, designed by one of her former protégés and gifted to her as a gesture of solidarity. As she stepped inside, something in her exhaled. Not relief, not triumph. Freedom. There were still boxes to unpack, nursery plans to finalize, and 1,000 small tasks to prepare for motherhood. But for the first time in months, maybe even years, she felt weightless. Her name was hers again, her space, her future. In the weeks that followed, the media cycle shifted. Tiffany Monroe, once smug and calculating, faded from the spotlight. Her attempt to provoke Lillian into public humiliation had backfired spectacularly. After her tantrum at the law firm and failed attempt at extortion, no outlet wanted to hear her side. She had become a punchline, not a headline. Christian maintained a dignified silence, releasing a statement that read, "After careful reflection, Ms. Westfield and I have decided to part ways amicably. I remain committed to supporting her and our child with the utmost respect and privacy." But Lillian didn't need his words. She had everything she needed: her own business, her child, and a renewed sense of who she was. She resumed design work, slowly starting with remote consultations and vision boards. Her first client post-settlement was a new wellness retreat in upstate New York. The space, she decided, would be built on themes of renewal, balance, and quiet strength. In a way, it mirrored her own rebirth. Her friends returned, some with apologies for not seeing the cracks, sooner others simply offering support without explanation. Lillian welcomed them with open arms. She had no energy for bitterness, only forward momentum. In late spring, she stood in the condo's living room, a glass of herbal tea in hand, sunlight streaming across the hardwood floor. Her baby kicked softly beneath her dress, a small reminder of all she had fought for. She smiled not at the world, not at a camera, but at herself. She had not only survived betrayal, she had transformed it. The mistress had sent her a bill. But Lillian, she sent back divorce terms worth millions, and in the process she secured something even more valuable: peace. Lillian's journey reminds us that betrayal, no matter how deep, can be a powerful catalyst for rediscovering our own worth. She turned a humiliating demand from her husband's mistress into an opportunity to secure the future for herself and her child. In doing so, she proved that resilience and self-respect can outweigh even the grandest illusions of wealth and status. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster of secrets, scandal, and redemption. If you found Lillian's story inspiring, or if it made your blood boil, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more gripping tales to life. And remember, sometimes the darkest moments can lead us to the brightest new beginnings. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and never underestimate the power of self-worth.